Good morning. This is where I woke up today. Sorry about the wind. I've got my little wind thing on, but it's not doing a lot of good up here because it's so windy. But I wanted to tell you guys about this place in Colorado. I'm just outside of Poncha Springs in the Shavano wilderness area. And I wanted to tell you why I think this is ideal BLM. This is a different kind of BLM than I thought was available out there when I first started RVing. And I also want to tell you about some stuff that happened here because it's been a little crazy. So it was so windy out there that I couldn't even finish that video, even from inside. So I'm doing this a little bit out of order. But 3 things happened in that BLM spot that have never happened to me before, so I wanted to share it with you. I was going to tell you when I was outside that it was ideal BLM. I mean, look at this, you guys. This is in Colorado, and I'm going to put the GPS coordinates for it below. But I thought when I was first a nomad that BLM camping meant you go out to the middle of nowhere by yourself down these terrible roads, and you kind of have to determine where there's a spot to pull in that's an actual campsite. Well, this place is a dream. It's like 10 miles outside of Salida, Colorado, which is a pretty big town, and you have mostly a paved road until you get almost right up to the camping spot, and about a mile in from there, there's a sign that says BLM camping, 14-day limit, and you pull in, and there's just roads everywhere and campsites, and they're super far apart. You can see a few other people, but there are views 365 degrees in this place, and the fall colors were changing, and the stars at night were absolutely crazy. And that brings me to the first thing that happened. You guys may have seen in the thumbnail that I talked about space stations. You guys, I wish that I had footage of this, but I have got to tell you about it in case you get the opportunity to see something similar. I was out there camping with Carol, who's in a Class C, and my friend Peggy, who's in a van, and Doug, my boo, came up to visit for the weekend, and we were all sitting out there late one night at a campfire, and the stars in this place are insane. And we look up, and there's a bright light shooting across the sky. Not a shooting star, but not a plane, because there were no flashing lights. And genius Peggy says, I wonder if that's the International Space Station. And I thought, oh gosh, we would never see a space station from down here. But Carol had an app on her phone, I think it was called Starlight or something. It's one of those apps that you hold up and you can see the constellations, and we were doing that several nights in a row. So she grabbed her phone and we put it up to point at that light that was shooting across, and sure enough, it was the International Space Station. We looked it up, and you don't get to see the space station very often in the sky, and you don't get to see it for like 5 minutes straight, which is how we saw it. And then a couple of nights after that, we saw it for a minute or 2 at a time, and we would go out and look for it. And I'm telling you, it was just really cool. It was maybe one of my top 5 camping experiences so far. Really loved it. So let's get to the next 2 things that happened. Now, I said sirens in the title, and yeah, we were sitting at this campsite and we heard sirens come into the campground, which I've never had happen. Well, I've never had this happen before, so nobody think that this is a regular thing on BLM land. But like I said, there were some other campers that were far enough away that we weren't right on top of them, but we could see like the bumpers of their cars from a distance. That was it. And one night I went outside at like 1 o'clock in the morning to look at the stars, and I was standing out there in the dark because I don't turn on any lights or anything. I hear this door slam, and I hear this guy scream, "Open the effing door!" Bam, 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 bam. Open the effing door! And I went, oh crap. She locked him out. Whatever's going on over there, she locked him out at night in the middle of nowhere. And a second later, the door shut. I didn't hear any screaming, any arguing, or anything, but you know, I stood out there for a few minutes just to make sure I didn't hear anything, right? Well, I don't know if this was related to the siren exactly, but that argument was in the same direction that the siren went about 3 days later. So, you know, being the nosy Parkers that we are, at least Carol wasn't nosy. She just sat in her chair and, you know, didn't want to be nosy, and good on her. But Peggy and Doug and I, you know, just decided to take a walk down there and see what we could see. And it turns out that BLM has a law enforcement division, and now I'm going down that rabbit hole and doing a bunch of research on that, because it turns out that they actually investigate like active cases, which I didn't know. But we came around the corner and we were really surprised to see a big burly BLM truck, but it said BLM law enforcement, and there was an officer not to be messed with, and he was solo, covered in gear, and in front of him, pushed up against the car, was a guy in handcuffs. There was another couple there that took off in their camper, and a solo female in a van. So maybe he was with the girl in the van and something happened and they called the police. That guy was clearly arrested, and then we saw the officer make sure that everybody left. This is just life, you guys. Almost every apartment I've ever lived in, somebody was fighting next door. This is the first time it's ever happened on BLM land. I'm really glad, first of all, that girl let him back in, because I didn't want someone knocking on my door at 2 o'clock in the morning saying they needed to use my phone. And I really liked that if something happens, a law enforcement officer will come out there and take care of it. So that was really good. And now, the thing I'm really excited to tell you about is the spider, and I actually have some shots of this. First of all, I lived in Costa Rica. I'm not afraid of bugs. I guess I had a healthy fear of bugs before I lived there, but you cannot live there and care. I mean, after that, they're just everywhere and they're huge and they look absolutely prehistoric. So I've run into a few bugs in here, but I also do things to make sure the bugs don't come in. So I was completely shocked when I grabbed some dishes off of a drying mat and a spider launched itself at me. When I say launched itself at me, I'm telling you, I picked up a dish, and from inside of another dish, I believe, this thing flew about 8 inches through the air, and I actually thought it was a hornet or a bee because it had the markings of a bee, and it was like, you know, like that big. So really quick, I grabbed a coffee mug and I put it on top and went, what was that? Usually I'm camping by myself, you know, and I would just scoop it up and put it outside and no big deal. But because it seemed like the weirdest freaking spider I had ever seen in my life, I text Carol and I say, hey, what you doing? Can you help me with something? And she texts back and she said, what you need? And I said, bravery. So she comes over, we grab Teresa, and I say, look, there's a spider under there. It looks like a bumblebee. And I just want to show you guys before I throw it out. I'm thinking it's going to be like a cool science thing and we can just check out the spider and then I'll put it out. So I grab a mason jar out of glass and I move the coffee cup to put the mason jar on it, and all of a sudden that one spider became what we thought was 2 spiders, and they went 2 different directions and one flew again. You have never seen 3 grown women scream and hold each other's arms like that in your life, and none of us are scaredy cats, but it was just so freaking weird. And in like a split second I look down and I realize the one that was still sitting where the cup was a giant dead fly, and the spider had jumped out over here and was no longer under anything. It was just sitting there. So quick, I grabbed the mason jar and I put it over this spider. And here's some shots of that freaking spider. So you can see that it has like a big tail like a wasp and it's striped. The pictures through the glass were not great and I don't have live footage of it, but you guys, I wasn't thinking about getting YouTube footage at this point. We were just like, what the hell was that? It turned out that when I grabbed that plate and the spider launched itself at me, it was carrying its dinner. That's why it looked like it was about that big. And after I trapped it, it let go of its dinner and hopped away. And I'll tell you, when I cleaned up that fly, which was a big freaking full-grown fly, it fell apart into 3 pieces. It was like the head, the wings, the body. I don't know what the spider did to this thing, but it was already just completely desiccated. So not knowing what the spider was, I scoop it up and I walk it out and I try and dump it out. And I'm telling you, this spider would not get out of the jar, and it was like running at me, and it was sitting like this on top of the jar, and I'm like kicking it going, okay buddy, go be free. And it had no interest in going, and it was completely aggressive. So we go back to the campsite, and Carol sits over there on her phone, and she goes, oh, it looks like it was a hobo spider. And I go, oh, hobo spider. Well, that sounds completely harmless. And then Carol goes, hobo spider is one of the 3 deadliest spiders in the world. And I mean, we were all like, what? On the website Carol found, it said, you know, brown recluse, black widow, hobo spider were the most dangerous spiders. So this is a picture of what a hobo spider looks like. This is not the one that was in my rig, but this is a clearer view of one, in case you guys get one. I'll tell you, since then, I did a bunch of research, and the hobo spider may not be as dangerous as people thought it was a few years ago, but it's still a nasty bugger. So if you get bitten by one, you can get big lesions on your skin. You have to go to the hospital right away. You have to get an updated tetanus shot. And so now you guys know I'm doing a bunch of research on how to keep dangerous spiders out of here. And then the funniest thing was, when I did my research, I found out 2 things about the hobo spider that I didn't know. First of all, they usually live by themselves on the ground. They're not great climbers. So how this thing got up, I don't even know. But they only come indoors in September. And this happened September 30th, so I'm a little out of order here. But they come inside to mate that 1 month. So good timing, Robin. And the second thing it said online is, if you have hobo spiders, don't keep your bed pushed up against the wall, and don't have any bedding hitting the floor, because they'll crawl up and stay in your bed. And this thing behind me is a Murphy bed. So I can't keep my bed from touching the wall. So you know, that night I was like tossing all the linens and trying to make sure nothing was in there, and I kept thinking things were crawling on me. But all's well. Everything is good, and it was an interesting experience. So you guys know I don't do a lot of travel videos, but I had to share these 3 things with you, and this beautiful spot that we were in. I hope you enjoyed it. Everybody, please give this a thumbs up if you liked it, so other people can discover this video in this channel. I appreciate you watching very much. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with your friends. Everybody have happy travels out there, and be free.